all of the time. Through the darkest night, His light will shine. God is good. God is good. All the time. There you go. God is good. All the time. Put a song of praise in this heart of mine. God is good all the time. Through the darkest night, His light will shine. God is good. God is good all the time. If you're walking through the valley and there are shadows all around, do not fear. Love will guide you. Love will keep you safe and sound. God has promised to never leave you or forsake you. And His word is true. God is good all the time. Put a song of praise in this heart of mine. God is good all the time. Through the darkest night, His light will shine. God is good. God is good all the time. That's right. God is good all the time. Lord, put a song of praise in this heart of mine. God is good all the time. Through the darkest night, His light will shine. God is good. God is good. God is good. He's so good. He's so good. God is good. He's so good all the time. And our rhythm section was outstanding this morning. Thank you. Thank you to our front row on the right. Well done. So good afternoon, everyone. And I apologize for the rather circuitous route to get in, but the staff member was very kind, met us outside and said, so sorry, but there's a couple ways we can do this, and he brought us in through the offices. And so anyway, we did all that. Okay, first off, anybody have any miracles to report? Have you been out there deciding to... Yeah, any episodes? Anybody? I'm sure there are some. Well, that's all right. Maybe you'll think about them. Yes, Joe. You had to ask, didn't you? The question is, are there any bulletins? The answer is yes, and they're at home on my desk. And if anybody would like to rush over there and get them, please feel free. And the affirmation was great, and the quotes were great, and the cartoon was adorable. So I'll be sharing that all with you next week. I finished stuffing them this morning and putting the envelopes in and had them in my hand and just didn't get to the briefcase, which, as you know, always go to the place where they should be. Don't stop. Okay, so one of the things I'm kind of sad to announce is Bobby's daughter was in touch with me, and Bobby died on Friday, and she had congestive heart failure, and so she's missed Mal for a long time. So. But she kept very cheerful, and I'm just sorry she wasn't able to come up and visit us again. I guess her son kept meaning to bring her again and just didn't do it. So I don't know yet about a memorial service. We're trying to figure something out so that everybody will be able to come. She said, does anybody at Heartlight remember Mom? I was like, well, yeah. I mean, Bobby and Mal came for years. Of course we remember them. But she was just wondering if we would still want to be present. And I said, yeah. Anybody who can be, will be. So, what else? Okay, so this week I've learned some interesting things. Oh, and Sandra's not here because she's at the third day of a real estate workshop that we've both been attending since Friday, and I've just blown my mind like that of stuff I've learned. It's fascinating and wonderful. But I heard something yesterday that I never thought I would hear from a young 35-year-old self-made millionaire. He said, the accumulation of wealth is absolutely meaningless if you don't make money matter. And I was just like, what? And he started showing, part of the presentation was not what he and his wife do privately, because he said that's private and we don't brag about it. But he has like 5 different companies now, and each one of them, one is completely sponsoring an orphanage in Mexico. One is in Africa. They've given seed to 1,000 farmers to plant their crops. 2 clean water projects with these women who were holding up their pitchers of water. And we all cried. I mean, we literally were in tears. And this young man also has had 2 near-death experiences, where he was ejected from a car going 80 miles an hour and survived. And then when he was recovering, he and a friend fell down a mine shaft. And he managed to grab a bush just before he fell. Now, his friend in the first one, his friend Steve, died. And his friend in the second one died. And he said, I decided that somebody has a purpose for me, and I better get on it. And I was just, as I said, he had the 220 people pretty much in tears. And he said, I have to make my life matter. I have to use all this blessing. And I think he goes to Mariners Church, yes?
Of course you would find someone like that in your life.
Of course. I mean, I wouldn't just run into the average greedy person, you know. So I was, as I said, and he's smart, and he knows economics, and he just knows everything. And people in the audience were checking his math with their mortgage calculators and going crazy, and he'd go, am I right? They go, yes. And he's just doing it up on the board, you know. So, but what he said is that he's committed the rest of his life, and he's only 35. Can you imagine what he can do? And that made my heart a happy heart. Anything else anybody want to announce or tell us about? No, Jansky, are you having your thing next Friday? Okay, she's going to have a procedure, and we're gonna be putting you in our thoughts. And Tuesday, of course, is class. Anything else? Okay, let's move on. Yes, Joe.
I want to thank Russell for that orchestra playing the song.
Oh.
With the trumpeter.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I didn't want to do anything. Anyway, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell, for all that you do. Remind me to give you your check. I have it in my wallet. So let's turn to page 6, if you will, please. We'll get going here. And we'll sing this hymn along with the perkiest choir on earth. They're so incredibly enthusiastic. Okay.
This is the day that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. This is the day that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. 'Cause this is the day that the Lord has made. The Lord has made.
Don't you just see those people as being part of like Young Americans or something? Just really enthusiastic. So let's just sit back for a moment. Let's be quiet for a moment. And remember who you are.
We are invited to go even deeper with
today we recognize, we look in the mirror of our souls and we see that we are indeed images of God. We are the hands, we are the faces, we are the hearts on this planet that express spirit, that express love. I am so grateful today that we are able to gather together in this beautiful space and be reminded not only of who we are, but of how the many ways in which we can change our world. We indeed want to be the change in the world that we want to see in the world, and that is what we do every day. And I give my personal thanks and my gratitude for each and every one of you, for all the people that you know and whose lives that you touch are carrying our message in farther and farther beyond this circle until it is an infinite stream of kindness, compassion, and love. This is something that we celebrate every Sunday, and let us say together, and so it is. Amen. So, I think we have a reading. She said, yes, we do. Miss Paula, let's give her a hand. Well, I just like, yes, I think we do. There she is. I'm just checking.
Good afternoon. I'm reading today from a book called Blessings by Julia Cameron. The little saying just before the article I was reading says, there is a place where words are born of silence, a place where the whispers of the heart arise. And that's by Rumi. This is entitled, I am divinely partnered and led. I am blessed by the guidance of spirit in many forms. I open my heart and my mind to the influence of higher forces. I relinquish my definition of myself as small or limited. I invite guidance and inspiration, and I welcome new thoughts and perceptions, larger perspectives and possibilities. Rather than insist on being the sole author of my life, I invite the collaborative forces of the universe. Synchronicity, coincidence, reinforcement, and serendipity, these are the friendly companions which speak to me clearly of higher realms. Rather than close my mind to the possibility of active spiritual intervention in my affairs, I commit to noticing, noting, and acknowledging the support which I actually receive. Life is an orchestra. I am at once a musician, a conductor, a composer, and the audience. I recognize my multiple roles, and I embrace the harmonics of my accompaniment. I am perfectly, integrally partnered. I count this partnership a central blessing in my life.
I love that. I am the music, and I am the musician, and I am the conductor, and I am the composer, and I am the audience. That is wonderful. I like that. So I'm being a little awkward this morning because I did something bizarre to my right shoulder, my rotator cuff or something, so I'm not doing this lifting up of my arm. It's going to stay down here by my side. So we are in part 3 of the hidden teachings that we find in myths. And today's topic, and you would know this if you had a bulletin in front of you, is the tomb was always empty. And I'm sure you know what tomb I'm talking about because of the time of year that it is. And as I said, we're in part 3, very quick recap. Many people put all myths in the same box. They say the Greek myths, the Roman myths, the Bible stories, all in the same box. Well, we can't do that. All of them have a point. All of them have something to teach us. And I'm not going to say one is better than the other. I'm just going to say they all have something to teach us. On the surface, they seem like fake stories. As I said, we don't really think that Noah built an ark. Maybe he did, but we don't think he managed to get 2 of every animal on the earth on one boat. It seems highly unlikely. But we do know that if we draw something parallel, for example, in just that one instance, each of us has a mission and a purpose here on earth. One of the other things this instructor, or this speaker, said yesterday, he said, I had to find out my why. Why? Why am I here? Why am I a person who is being very successful. What am I going to do with that? And he challenged everybody in the audience to go home and figure out their why. And I just thought, yes. And of course I knew what my why was. My why is Heartlight, and my why is changing the world, making it a better place, however that looks. So as I said, this is a season of powerful metaphors. We have Easter, we have Passover, and there are vital teachings everywhere. So we put on our Heartlight secret decoder ring, and we understand what we're talking about, okay? Because we, and I've said this before, and I hope you understand, are the living mystery. So what Paula read, that's the mystery, is how we can be the music, the musician, the conductor, the composer, and the audience, all at the same time. So our essence, our God selves, are a bit shrouded in the unknown. How many of you have met your God selves? Maybe briefly, but you've met. Okay, I'm sure you have. And you kind of wonder, why doesn't that person stay around? Why do I seem to get caught up in the world again? And that's just because, you know what, if we could be completely our God selves, we would ascend. We would not be here. We would do what Jesus did, which is to just ascend, dematerialize. So imagine, if you will, everybody on the planet, at least occasionally, meeting their God self. Can you imagine how the world would change if everybody knew that about themselves? For those of us who were brought up in Judaism or Christianity, we know that we are the Christ energy in form. That's why we say things like namaste, and which has many meanings, a wealth of rich meanings. And the second lesson in this, of knowing our purpose, is that we are who we thought we were waiting for. So many people are still waiting. They're waiting for a second coming of somebody. They're waiting for a first coming, perhaps, of their Messiah. We're here. We're here. We are the people we've been waiting for. We are the people who are providing the energy for this world to move from this age into the next age. It's because we're all paying attention. The time is now. So sometimes we're afraid to stand firmly in our truth. Sometimes we're not quite sure of ourselves, but when we dig down deep inside, it's there. It's always there. And I did the example from the book of Ezekiel, all the whole strange story of bones knitting themselves together and standing up and becoming something. And that was merely a lesson that we can make something out of nothing, that we can bring light to darkness, that when we speak our word, love's will is done. That's what that story is about. God can only work through us. So we can also roll back the stone and step out into the light. And Ezekiel's awakening causes him to shift his thinking about what God is and about what his own power is. It causes him to think about his own holiness, his own truth, his own ability to change the world. It also tells him he is worthy and loved and brilliant and powerful, and so are you. Everyone in this room. Last week we talked about the story of Yeshua, a man with 12 disciples who is killed and then arises again. And as I told you then, that story has been told about many other very important figures in our history. But he came to understand that he was moving into a new phase of his awareness that was rebirth. Rebirth as a spiritual being, completely aware of his spirituality, which is why he became, what would you say, diaphanous, sort of almost see-through, because he was so light, so airy. The most important point of that whole story, though, after we've read it, is that it's about us. And so often we ignore what Ernest Holmes and others have said, that he showed us the way. Jesus showed us the way. He didn't come and say, I am so cool. I am so much more enlightened than all of you people. That's not what he said. You shall do these things and greater. The kingdom of God is within you, over and over. And as a matter of fact, when the disciples kept saying, but what about this and what about that? He got a little annoyed. I've told you the answers. And it was just a little too mysterious. So, Yeshua was a teacher. We are teachers. Yeshua had faith. We have faith. Yeshua had fear. We have fear. He was lost in the darkness a time or two. Have anybody here been lost in the darkness a time or two? In the end, he stepped into the light. He stepped into the light. He knew what was true, and so do we. So moving on to part 3. As you know, there is no one story about the events of the resurrection. People think it must be all the same story. It isn't. The 4 Gospels do not agree in all the details, but then again, those writings were never meant to be compiled into one book. They were written by different people with different perspectives, and an authority, hundreds of years later, picked out some accounts and put them in. Why they didn't just make them agree, I don't know. But they were compiled, and the authors had different expectations of what they were to do with this information, different personalities, and also they were writing for their community. So for example, if you were writing a speech, and I said, okay, you're going to go give this speech to the First Christ Church, First Christ Lutheran Church, would you write something different than if you were coming here? Different audience. You would still have your truth, but you would probably, like Joel Osteen does, he takes all these New Thought things and phrases them in Bible terms, and people just eat it up. Because he said, oh, look, it's what the Bible says. And it does. So we don't need to be terribly concerned about the fact that these 4 accounts don't match. But there are some key points that do match. And one of the things we find in 3 of them, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, is that we have Joseph of Arimathea, who's a very important figure in that story and also later on. He is the one who provides the tomb, or the cave, for Jesus, and he requests permission to receive and care for the body of Jesus. We also have 2 Marys in all 4 stories. We have Mary of Magdalene, who was not a hooker, by the way. Just got to get over that. And we have Mary, the mother of James, who was there. So the 2 Marys are in every story. They are vital symbols. Remember that in the first part of the story of Jesus' life, whom do we have? Joseph and Mary, right? Okay, this is not a coincidence that we have a Joseph and Mary at the end of this story. Okay, the parents of, his original parents, Mary and Joseph, represents one birth, a human birth into form. So there has to be a Joseph and Mary present at the end of the story because they represent the masculine and feminine in everything, in all things, including you. Nothing is created in this universe without the divine masculine and the divine feminine being involved. Okay? Those are the 2 aspects of duality. Without Mars and Venus, without the sun and the moon, pick your pair, nothing happens. Okay? And another consistency between the stories is that there is a tomb and there is a stone. But perhaps the most profound and beautiful consistency, and I'm kind of surprised the men let this stand, but they did, because it was a very patriarchal time where women weren't even supposed to talk. It was women who saw that the tomb was empty, right? It was women who went to care for the body of their beloved Jesus, and it was the women who went to tell the disciples, because the disciples, and there were more than 12, there were a lot of disciples, they were hanging out somewhere else because they just couldn't bear the thought. But the women could. They knew that was their job. Go find the body, take care of the body, wrap it, give it oil, anoint it. But the disciples were someplace else, and by the way, they didn't believe the women. They thought they were just a bunch of silly hens, raving about this body not being there. So why is this point so beautiful and so important that it was the women? Because I'm not saying women are better than men by any means. I'm saying it takes both to build a world. The symbolism is that life only comes through a woman. We can all admit that. That's one of the things that makes women stand out, is that they can give birth. That's an amazing power. So for this rebirth, the birth must happen through the divine feminine, which is why it is the women who discover that Jesus has been reborn, although they don't know that right away. Interestingly, the accounts differ about who the women were. One of them only talks about, and I love this, the women. The women. Doesn't seem to matter who they were. Another names Mary of Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Joanna and Salome as all being present. But it doesn't matter, because the story is about a group of women who believed in light, who believed in love, who believed in the message that was called the way, the way of love. And they stuck through it, through thick and thin, even through the grief of the death of their beloved teacher. They were present to witness a profound truth because they stuck with it. And again, you will recall that they don't believe the women, and that's part of the myth because the divine masculine is external. It works on facts, it works on specifics, it works on this is this and that's that, and let's get a category for it. It's also in the form, do you remember Doubting Thomas? Okay, he's a symbol of that doubt. Like, you don't want to intuitively know that Jesus is love. You're going, show me some more miracles, and I'll decide. It's okay. The feminine, the divine feminine, is about the internal. It's about intuition. It's about knowing. It's about not needing facts, but knowing. Okay? They know without outward proof. So that's the backdrop of our resurrection story. So at the account in the book of Luke, in the beginning, it tells us something powerful. In the first chapter, in the first 3 verses, it says, since many have undertaken, and he knows lots of people writing about this, since many have undertaken to set down an account of the events that have been fulfilled among us, things, what's happened, just as they were handed on to us, clue that he was not there, handed on to us from the beginning, who were eyewitnesses and servants of the word, I too decided after investigating everything carefully, because he's a guy, he's going to go investigate, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus. So it's being addressed to a particular person and community. So what is this particular writer saying? He's saying first that there are a whole lot of Jesus stories out there. He felt compelled to investigate, talk to some people who had other accounts, might have been there, might not, and had been told over and over again, and handed down to subsequent generations, because you know the earliest book of the Bible was almost 100 years after Jesus is supposed to have died. And he decides to write his own version, which tells you that there were more than one. So there are numerous versions that explain why other accounts not in the Bible talk about the resurrection. You all do know, right, that the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Nicodemus, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Pistis Sophia, all tell the story. But they were chosen not to be included in the actual Bible canon, what they call the canonical Bible. So other people, not God, decided what would be included in our book that everybody carries around and thumbs you over the head with. But those are individual testimonies. So the interesting thing is that when the church fathers, I guess you would say, met at the council and said, what are we going to put in this here Bible? And they sent out an order. Burn everything else. Burn every story, every gospel, every account, especially if women wrote it, burn that. Burn it. Now, did they? No. Because there were some very spiritual people, particularly Essenes, who really identified with Jesus, who said, the hell with that. We are so not burning this stuff. So not doing it. And so they put it in jars, and they covered it with skin, and they buried, in many different places, they buried Gospels. And as you know, the Dead Sea Scrolls and all the things that have been found since have been dug up all over the place, including fragments of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And it's only 7 or 8 pages that remain of that, unfortunately. But these Gospels in the 1940s began to show up again. And at first, by the way, when they showed up, museums and major churches said, it's crap. Don't even go there. Don't translate it. Don't even try. And of course, we couldn't translate it. When throughout our history, we've had to have things like the Rosetta Stone that would help us finally decode something. But they basically said, don't bother. Lock it up at the museum, especially the British Museum, and don't look at it again, because you know it's going to be heresy. Well, we have curious people who said, I don't think so. Okay? I think they showed up because it was their time to show up. We weren't ready for it before then. And also, again, and I'll probably repeat this more than once, I don't tell you all this historical stuff so that you can pass a quiz on the Bible, although I think Paula could. because she's like more of our Bible scholar. And I don't tell you these stories as if it has only to do with people who lived thousands of years ago. What would be the point, okay? This is not a history lesson. This is a way of reintroducing you, to who you are. Because the stories are all about you. They are not about those long ago people. They're just here to teach us something, okay? The value and the power in these myths and symbols is how do they enrich and inform your life? How do they make you see the world differently? How do they inform your choices every day? Don't you think, being wonderfully human, and I say that with no tongue in cheek, that you would find a story about you more interesting than a story about people you've never met? Probably a lot less yawn-inducing than stories about potentially fictional people who are at the very least dead and dust millennia ago. So whenever you ponder the stories, remember you're at the center of the story. So getting